British music producer Paul Epworth has worked with some enormous names, including Adele, U2, Coldplay and Paul McCartney. But his new studio, The Church, has a creative history all of its own. Although formerly a house of worship, the building has at various stages been owned by the makers of children's TV shows, as well as Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics and singer-songwriter David Gray. Over the years, it has also welcomed Bob Dylan, Radiohead and Depeche Mode. We take a look around and talk to Paul about his vision for the newly renovated studios. We're here for Sound on Sound at the Church Studios in North London with Mr. Paul Epworth.
Hi.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. How you doing?
Very well, thank you.
So, Paul, you've got quite a list of credits to your name, and you've got a Brit Award, 5 Grammys, an Oscar, and your latest endeavour is this place, the Church. So, do you want to tell us a bit about the history of it and how you came to be involved with the place?
Well, I'd set out looking for a studio, and my search wasn't quite as fruitful initially as I hoped it was going to be. And I went through several different spaces to try and find somewhere that obviously I could make noise late at night. Eventually sort of had a call from David Gray saying he was looking to pass this place on. And initially I thought there's no way that I'm going to be able to make this place work. And then I kind of, after a few months of kind of gradually sort of trying to get my head around the idea, I sort of called him up and said, are you still looking for someone else to take that on? He said, I'm about to sell it. And I said, don't do it. I think I might have a solution. And we worked it out, and this is about May last year. And I think we finally got it all together by October, and then moved in January, and then had sort of set about trying to sort of renovate the place a bit. And
so, in terms of the renovations, then what have you done to the place? Because this room, it doesn't seem like it's changed an enormous amount. But
no,
do you want to tell us about
we put a huge desk in the live room.
That's the most striking feature.
Yeah, it wouldn't fit in the control room. There was obviously the SSL room downstairs, which was built in sort of 1986, I think. And then there was a little studio out the back, which was more of like a sort of somewhere. It was originally a lounge that someone had set up a studio in. And I sort of began to try and work out how we could make this room and both the rooms downstairs into sort of good, sort of commercially viable studios. And one thing that we discovered when we were doing our sort of acoustic tests was that it's clear this room up here hadn't been used very much when the room downstairs was in use.
So this is Studio 1 that we're in at the moment?
This is Studio 1 and Studio 2 is the SSL room. And it was clear there was the isolation between the two rooms wasn't maybe as complex as it needed to be to deal with the speakers we were intended to put in downstairs. So we had to sort of start from scratch, which involved basically raising the existing SSL room to the ground and rebuilding it on with 140 decibels of isolation. So that was a 9-month job.
Wow. And I mean, it's a pretty spectacular room now.
Yeah, it's a good space to work in.
So what was was it just the isolation that was the thing you wanted to change about it, or were there other concerns about the design? I
mean, specifically, the major criteria was I wanted to put in some speakers that I liked working on and weren't taxing on the ears over long periods of time. Were capable of dealing with the sort of the bass of modern music, and so we thought we'd initially do this by taking out one front wall. And after a while, it became clear that it wasn't going to be that easy. And also, obviously the bass transmission between the room downstairs and this room there was a lot more, communication between the two rooms than we'd hoped. So obviously, we needed to isolate the room downstairs because we didn't want to have to change this room at all because it felt, it's such a character space that we didn't really want to touch it. So obviously the work we had to do downstairs, we relied on their kind of expertise of WSDG to design the room. I'd used a room of theirs in New York, which I really enjoyed working in. I felt like the main monitoring was really good. So he basically set out to try and sort of recreate that here, in the hope that it was going to work for us, but it was also going to work for other people. And then 9 months later.
So this room itself, we're in Studio One, and it's an amazing space. But one thing that's really striking as you come in is that there's no control room.
Yeah.
So is that sort of your personal preference, or what's the reasoning for that?
Well, the funny thing is, actually, I do like working in open plan spaces, because I feel like you're much more connected with the people you're working with. There's a sort of healthy communication, and I think you kind of get a much better understanding of the creative dynamics that are going on in the room with a group of musicians, and so that from that perspective, I think I've always enjoyed working in spaces where there isn't glass, and you do have to monitor on headphones when you're recording. You have to make compromises, like test recording something before you put someone in for a pass, or you just go in for a pass and just hope, and hope for the best.
Right.
So it does require certain compromises. But the other compromise was the fact that I knew putting a desk like this into the studio, it puts it in a slightly different bracket in terms of the specifications that people look for. So I'd actually already bought this desk to put in somewhere else, and it was never going to fit in that control room.
Yeah, it's a bit of a beast. So do you want to tell us about the desk then? What exactly is it, and how did it come to be?
In 1976, EMI commissioned Neve to make them 5 custom boards. All the modules are 1091s. The EQ mic amp modules are 1091s, which are basically a 1073 with slightly different EQ characteristics. There were 5 of these desks built, and this actually comprises 2 of them. One was in Abbey Road. One half of it was in Abbey Road, in Studio 3. So I think one of the first recordings it did, I'm told, was "Wish You Were Here."
Right.
And the other half was in a studio called Pathé Marconi in Paris. And I'm aware that this half of the board did "Some Girls" by the Rolling Stones. So I think you can definitely hear a bit of the character of it on a record like "Miss You," and the sort of the depth of these boards you can get out of these boards. They have quite a specific character to them, which I think, in terms of having this board with this sort of the openness that you get from it in a space like this, I think there's it's a pretty special combination. And if you're willing to accept the compromises that having the board in the same room provides, the monitoring sounds good in here as well, so you get a pretty good idea of what you're doing.
So do you find yourself mixing on this desk, or are you doing that all on the SSL downstairs?
No, it really depends. I mean, we quite often will get something up to a certain stage in here. Some of the U2 mixes that were essentially board mixes from this room were tweaked slightly and went on the album. So conversely, some of the tracks, you work on something up here, take it down to the writing room and finish it off down there, or into the SSL. But in terms of we've had WSDG have tuned and accurately set the monitoring up in here as well. So even though we haven't essentially made any acoustic changes apart from obviously a bit of absorption to try and sort of tailor the room down, we've done everything we can to try and make sure so you can actually get a good idea of what you're listening to here.
Yeah.
And then we've got the writing room and the SSL room obviously have built to quite exact specifications. So we think they're some of the most accurate control rooms in the country.
So if we just if we talk about the setup that's in this room then, to start with, I mean, it's set up now for a session.
Yeah.
So do you want to just talk us through what you've got going on in terms of how you like things set up in this room and why you've decided to go for...
We've set the drums up over there in the centre, so you've got plenty of room to be able to get delay mics back from the kit. We've got a couple of ambients here, occasionally we use wide mics in the corners. But the main thing is where the drums are set up, we can either baffle them down so you get a tighter kit sound, or we can open it up. We've obviously got the curtains here that you can draw across that David Gray put in. And so if you suddenly need a kind of tighter drum sound, you can pull the curtains across and baffle the top of the screens in. Got a sort of piano world over there, which is just kind of it's obviously nice to be able to get the piano projecting into the room, and so it makes sense for obviously to do it that way around, so there's eye contact from the musicians if they want to playing together. But we've actually set up quite a nice little sort of synthesizer world over here now, so we can. It's pretty fast if you want to kind of overdub stuff of people playing together. And
there are some pretty interesting pieces in synth world.
Yeah. There's a few nice little bits and pieces. But one of the major beneficial things is, of course, you can have when you're recording, you can have eye contact yourself as an engineer or producer with the musicians as well, which means that you can very quickly get involved in guiding performances or encouraging people to repeat parts, or sort of stand around waving your hands frantically to try and sort of get them to guide them to do the right thing, or what you perceive as the right thing. It's one of the major things I think having is it's really wonderful having daylight, which I think keeps a level of sanity when you're doing long hours.
Yeah. So, in terms of gear, then I guess are there any things, any favourite toys or anything that you have at the moment? Are things you're sort of
loads of stuff. One thing we tried to do here is, because there's so much we do in the digital domain, so quite often as soon as you go into Pro Tools, you're not committed, but it's nice to be able to make sure you get sounds with character into, we've got clasp set up here so you can actually record via tape, but it means you're not forced to then have to dump everything in and hope you can synchronize it, and all the sort of the complications that provides. So clasp makes things very easy to do, and obviously what people talk about doing drums to tape and guitars to tape, but the one thing that's underrated is doing synthesizers to tape. Really? And that it does really add sort of colour and character to the sound, and quite often a lot of the sort of classic synthesizer sounds were obviously recorded to tape originally. So kind of there's that sort of factor as well, but we've tried to kind of get a good balance of modern gear, Class A stuff, and a healthy collection of valve gear, which means you can that depending on whether you want to go for a sort of Class A more 70s kind of sound, or sort of an earlier 60s or valvey 60s sound, or if you want to go straight digital, you can do it. So I think that's. I look to try and take things from different eras, and to try and get different characters, and sometimes kind of combining these things, you get something new. And I think that's I guess every engineer producer knows that they can change the effect of something by switching a mic amp or switching a microphone. But I think that's that we've tried to sort of go to the extreme here, because and cater for versatile tastes and different kinds of music as well. So hopefully we've done it.
Can we talk a bit more specifically about some of your sort of favourite bits of gear, so that we can sort of, maybe this thing over here or whatever it might be.
The computer rhythm, that's sort of the first programmable drum machine, which is I was always curious how to have something which was very easy to put patterns into, and it's a bit of a collector's item. You used to get punch cards for it. You could actually put the rhythms in by just dropping a punch card through. But sadly, this one didn't come with the punch cards, and I think they're very hard to replicate. But I think it's easy enough to put a pattern in if you want it. And just the ease of being able to go, well, look, here's a rhythm. you can do it in a matter of seconds and synchronize it to the computer. So the quicker the creative process is, the easier it is to get your ideas across, I think. I love the old, we've got a VCS Putney, EMS Putney, which is a bit of a favourite for putting everything through, for a bit of kind of a bit of grit and dirt to it, and it's I think you sort of we tend to use it as an aux send on everything.
Right.
But we've got a few old EMI bits. We've got like some of the old EMI mastering chain here. The sort of EMI, couple of EMI compressors and filters, and just managed to acquire one of the original Zena limiters, which is an absolutely amazing acquisition for overheads and stuff. It sounds beautiful.
And then you've also got a whole modular synth station going on here as well. Is this a bit of an obsession of yours?
No, yeah, that's a habit that can easily get out of hand. So it isn't just mine. I hasten to add, it's some of the other guys here have acquired stuff as well. But the beauty is you can put it all together and sort of connect it all up, and it all works in harmony.
So then down in Studio 2, you've got all of your, presumably that's some of your favourite outboard gear racked up behind the mix position. Are there sort of some bits that your go-tos for certain things, or?
I mean, it just depends. I mean, like, obviously you kind of, I think there are certain things that every studio I think needs to have in its, especially in a mix room. There's certain things I think there are specific criteria that everybody wants, aren't they? Like 1176s and issue these days distressors, a good valve, vocal compressor, or we've actually got a reissue Fairchild, which is done by a guy called Pom. It's called the Pom Child, which is actually really sounds really beautiful, and I'm a big fan of all the EAR gear. So we've got a lot of that everywhere, including some of the microphone amplifiers in here, which I think are some of the best in the business. But yeah, but at the same time we've got RMX 16 and H3000, which I think are for certain classic sounds, they're definitely every studio should have them, and maybe not so much these days when you can do so much with plugins. But just for sort of creative randomness, sometimes you need to have these things around. Or if we're going for sounds of specific eras, I think it's quite useful to have to fall back on.
So then finally, moving on to the little writing room there, what do you think is the most important element in that to get the creative juices flowing, I guess? Everything at an arm's length. Yeah? Yeah, it really is. Just you can work in there on your own, and once you set up, everything is everything's an arm's length away. You want a guitar, you can reach the Neve. There's a little Neve sidecar. You can reach that. If you want to go and put some drums down, you hit record and go and jump in and do it. Or worst case, we've got the iPad remote, so you can go and jump in and actually drop yourself into record. So it means that in terms of actually being able to do stuff without the inhibition of having other people around watching you make a fool of yourself, it's quite useful. And I think that's the way a lot of modern records are made. Contrary to this space, which is probably how a lot of records are made in bygone eras. That very much is focused to be like a modern, sort of creative studio. There's been acoustically tuned, so you can hear, you get a good idea of what you're doing, and what you think, it's an accurate representation of what the music you're making. There's a few things we've tried to do down there to try and connect all the rooms together. Like we've used a Shadow Hills Equinox summing mixer, and one of the thinking behind that was because if you can either use it as a stereo out or as a 32-channel summing mixer. So the idea being that if you wanted to go in there and do a pre-mix, and obviously everything's at Unity gain, you can take the same session on Pro Tools or Logic, and you can take it next door into the SSL room and very quickly make the changes or do the kind of the outboard changes you wanted to do
without having to, spend a day per track. You can hopefully move through stuff fairly quickly. So it was kind of in terms of trying to make sure that the facilities we have are available to people on limited budgets. We can hopefully cater for everybody. That's something that I felt was very important to have in this day and age when records don't really sell very many.
So then that's an idea to kind of have the right through from inception to completion.
Yeah, there was as a holistic sort of completion between all the studios kind of operated together, and all the rooms are tied into one another, so that if you're in the writing room and you do a live piano, you could actually use the live room with the SSL room. The SSL room's tied up here, so if you wanted to use this space as an echo chamber, you can do, or you can use the belfry as an echo chamber if you wanted to. But we can't validate whether or not there'll be pigeons in there. So if you're happy with the sound of pigeons on your reverb, you're fine. But it's we've tried to make sure that we've got every sort of criteria covered with each of the 3 rooms, because I like working in each of these different environments depending on what the project is, and I think that then obviously if I can take care of my needs, hopefully it takes care of lots of other people's criteria as well. So you want the studio to be busy, and so you have to try and think about what people's sort of creative needs are, which hopefully we try to fulfil them. Nice one.
Great, thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you. Pleasure.